This is the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. The Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. With Stuart Cameron and Dale Clancy.
Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast, and things warming up nicely as we go even deeper into the business end of the season. And with Garnock's 13th win on the trot, they're still the only national club side who are unbeaten this season, so congratulations to them, particularly as they were playing regional rugby last season. Well, as usual, Dale Clancy is with me to look at this weekend's fixtures, but let's look back at last weekend's games, starting in the Premiership. Edinburgh Accies 29, Selkirk 31, Glasgow Hawks 27, Musselburgh 29, Heriot's Blues 17, Hawick 19, Kelso 25, Currie 20, and Marr 80, Jedforest 10. Interesting, the first three games there, all won by just 2 points.
Yeah, all really narrow games there, and obviously they all wins away from home as well. Hawick in the driving seat most of the game. They found the opening exchanges pretty tough at Goldenacre, but were able to be quite comfortable in the end. But Heriot did well to get back into that. But a good win for Musselburgh as well on the road to Glasgow Hawks. But I think perhaps the biggest surprise was Edinburgh Accies. A big fortnight for them. They had two Borders teams at home, and they've only been able to salvage a draw and a narrow defeat against Kelso and Selkirk. So that almost makes it a two-horse race for fourth place. Now,
I know we can use the phrase, it's mathematically possible, but let's disregard the nonsense. Hawick secure first place, so should be champions in my world.
Yes, in your world. I would hate to spend more than 10 minutes in your world, because I hate to think what else goes on in there. But you're right. Any league.
Sorry?
You're right. But in reality, out of Stuart Cameron's world, they've secured top spot in the division. There was times in that game, probably at Goldenacre, where you thought that Heriot might have snuck it. It might have made the last game and the end of the season a little bit more exciting in terms of the lie of the land with the top four. But yeah, Hawick are home and hosed, and it's probably just a matter now of Marr and Currie who can secure that other home semi-final. And then we've got that race for fourth place, which is the kind of twists and turns of Saturday. Kelso have almost stolen a march on everybody else. There's difficult games to come. There's not easy games in the Premiership. Well, there's potentially this season there's been one, but there's not a lot of easy games in the Premiership, and it's still really difficult to call. But it is now. You talk about mathematically possible. It's now between Kelso and Heriot for the top four.
Yes, that's true. But the elephant in the room at the end of the day is it's a league, isn't it, or not?
We're still in the same situation. The playoffs have been designed to try and create interest, and I think that even you, Stuart, I think if it got to the playoff semi-finals and we had Hawick versus Kelso in this first semi-final at Mansfield Park, I think you wouldn't have got that otherwise, and that would be a game that I'm pretty sure you'll be champing at the bit to cover.
Of course I will, there's no doubt about that, but it's not a league, is it? Because you look at National 1, National 2, National 3, National 4, Ayr are champions. Can you imagine Ayr? They've gone through the whole season unbeaten up to the last three games.
Right, but you've got to look at it though. It's a pyramid system. So at the top of the pyramid, they have that as a showpiece. Everything else is because the strength shouldn't really be there. So the best teams go up in those divisions, and the pyramid system works that way. So they can all end up at the apex of that to try and fight it out in these showpiece events, and that's what it's for.
But the last place you want to play off is to decide the champions of Scotland, surely.
Yeah, but there's just more riding on it. Yeah, I get your argument, but it's just to try, and we've spoken about it before, it's to try and promote the club game. It's to try and get more people into these big games at the end of a season, and you're guaranteed to get big games at the end of a season if you've got a playoff system. You're not always guaranteed to get that if you've just got a championship, because your point there about Ayr, this league, essentially, we could still have games to play with, not really much riding on it. Jed were down, Hawick are champions. Who's going to be going to these games? Because the last couple of weekends, there's not a lot on it. So I think the playoff system guarantees a little bit of excitement and showpiece, and to showcase the best of club rugby at the end of a season.
But you can have that excitement by just doing it in a slightly different way. You can still crown the champions after 18 games. And then, just look at the moment. Kelso 25 points behind Hawick, Edinburgh Accies 26 behind, Heriot's Blues and Musselburgh both 27 points behind the team that's finished at the top of the table, and yet they could still be crowned Scottish champions. In the case of Accies, they've lost 9 games this season. They could be Scottish champions. That doesn't make sense to me at all. all. And it is possible, of course, that you can, look at it in a different way and say, right, okay, after the 18 games, you've got your Scottish champion who's rightly finished on the top of the pile after 18 games that everyone has played. Love that. Why not then get the cup sorted out by saying 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7, so on and so forth. You have a great Scottish Cup Premiership final, which will give you as much fun and entertainment at the end of the season than a playoff does.
Yeah, and I get that argument, but I think that you can't argue the here and now. The top of the Premiership for the way that it's going towards the end of the season isn't exciting.
It is exciting, but it's not right.
But it's exciting. So, you're probably talking about...
But it's not right.
Yeah, but you're probably talking more about the fact that, just a little bit of credibility in the league. Like, I'm not attached to any of these teams, but I'm invested in where they all lie up and where they're going to end up at the end of the season, and all these games that even potentially, like, I'll be able to get to cover and go to and enjoy because of the way that that's structured. I don't doubt for a second there's other formats that would be able to provide that, but at the moment, and what I've witnessed over the last couple of years as well with the playoff finals, is that I've enjoyed this. People enjoy their product and their rugby in different ways. I'm not saying that if this was changed I wouldn't enjoy it as much, but I've enjoyed the way that this format has worked. And like the end of this season, we've got 2 teams who over the last couple of years have been nowhere near the playoffs. They've come up from National 1 as well in different formats. They're hammering it out to finish in 4th place to play who should be champions of Scotland, who were double winners last year, and there's something on the line in terms of they could topple them and we could have new Scottish champions going into the end of the season, because we could have a final at Melrose Park, we could be at Fullerton where we've never had a Premiership final. That sort of thing. For this season alone, that excites me. Other formats, yes, if there's a huge driver from the clubs to get rid of it, then that's fine, but I'm pretty sure if Kelso are crowned Scottish champions, they'll quite enjoy the playoff format.
I'm sure they will, but it's still not right. It could be Currie, it could be Marr, and it's happened before. We've seen, Marr become Scottish champions over Currie in the year that Currie should have won that.
Yeah, and Stirling Wolves, they beat Heriots in the semi-final. Heriots were top of the Super Series and then obviously got beat in the semi. Then they toppled Ayrshire Bulls. It was Cup rugby. It was different rugby they had to play.
And that's the key. That is Cup rugby.
Yeah, but there's as well, but we're trying to develop these rugby players to get them to a level where they're being able to progress in the professional game, or we can build a product that people will buy into. We don't have the same club game that we used to have decades ago where there was a lot of money in the sport. So as a rugby game itself, players should be able to, especially at the top of club rugby, should be able to adapt to the situation, change to the situation. So if they're playing cup rugby or league rugby, no matter what, there's still a prize and they still know what they need to do to win a championship. And if that is to go and not be defeated in as many games as possible to get a bit of advantage in a home semi-final, home final, then they know that's what they need to do. But then after that, it's just playing smart and it's playing to your advantages that you can try and create. If you don't get that, you've got a chance to sneak into the back door.
And that's what I don't like about it. I mean, no disrespect to Edinburgh Accies, great club, lovely club, but they have lost 9 games this season. If they did make it into the playoffs, and there's a good chance they could.
Yeah, take Edinburgh Accies out of the conversation because they're not going to finish in 4th.
Oh, but they could. The only thing that Edinburgh Accies would need to make that is 1 win on Saturday, and Kelso and Heriot's Blues both to lose their last 2 games, and Edinburgh Accies are up, so it's not beyond the realms of possibility.
It's not happening.
Well, that excites me, because every time you make a prediction, as Ian Chisholm had said last week, you went for Melrose and Dundee won at the Greenyards last week.
It's mathematically possible, but Edinburgh Accies are...
Well, there's more chance of that happening.
No, there's not.
There's more chance of that happening than Hawick conceding 120 points and Marr becoming number 1.
So I think we've just found out why you only put 10, 20p on the Grand National, because you're saying that there's more chance of Edinburgh Accies finishing in 4th position. Bearing in mind Edinburgh Accies are travelling to Melrose and Kelso are travelling to Riverside. So you're trying to say that Kelso will not beat Jed and they'll not beat Hawks.
It's possible.
It's just not happening. And Heriots also have to do the same, and they're at home to Hawks this weekend. It's not happening. But
you also said that Dundee would lose to Melrose. It didn't happen last weekend.
Yeah, I'm happy to be wrong. I also said Currie would beat Hawick a few months ago, and I got pelters for that as well. I never got pelters when I said Hawick would beat Marr, and Marr won, but that's a different story. Ian Chisholm almost provoked me to pick Melrose, and actually the reverse psychology worked, because Dundee got the victory. I just think Edinburgh Accies go into their game as second favourites this weekend at Millennium.
And you'd say Heriot's Blues have a good chance, huh?
Yeah, Heriot's Blues have a good chance.
They've lost 8.
Yeah, but the argument at this point is not the playoffs. This is the fact that you think that Edinburgh Accies could finish in 4th, and I don't think they can.
Yeah, but Heriot's good, and they've lost 8.
Yeah, they could. Well, that's when we get to this point in the playoffs. And when we get to this point in the season, we've got stuff to play for. And I still say the same thing. I understand there's different ways that this league could be formatted. It could be a boring league, and that might be what reverts back to. And there's nothing to play for in these games. But at the moment, we've still got those 3 teams, looking for that 4th position. But the playoffs gives you the showpiece at the end. And I think that's the whole thing underneath it, is the fact that it gives the best teams in the country an opportunity to go for the championship. And I know some people don't like it. I like it as a spectator, because...
But would you like it if, say, and again, no disrespect to Heriot's Blues, but they've lost 8, they could be Scottish champions? That doesn't send the right message, surely.
But everybody starts off at the beginning of the season and nobody's won or lost any games, and they know that you've got to go through, play those...
Oh, sure, absolutely. Everyone knows the rules, but is it right, though? But, and it can't be right. That scenario cannot be right. Stirling Wolves, as you said, won the Super Series in 4th place. There's only 6 teams in it. Well, Futures 7.
I don't know if I don't know if I'm getting hung up in the argument that you're saying it's right, because
that's the key for me. Because National 1, 2, 3, and 4, you're crown champions if you finish first.
Pyramid system.
And I don't buy into the pyramid system at all. I just don't think a league should have this sort of scenario.
And that's fine, but I think that in rugby, especially where we are with the club game and players and trying to attract people, the best players go to the top teams. Hawick, Marr, Currie, they've got the best club players in the country who are borderline semi-pro anyway. Most of their players could play semi-professional rugby. So I don't think it's bad to ask them to go through a league campaign and then focus for a couple of games to get their club over the line. That's, for me, rugby almost needs to be reimagined in this country with things like that. It's different. It provides those showpiece games that it's the opportunity to have them streamed, a different audience, to maybe perhaps inspire the young players coming through. It's just a different way. Sometimes a league campaign doesn't get that, so I like it. I'm still to be swayed on it. I just think that in the Premiership I quite like the playoff system.
OK, let's go on to the Premiership table then, which has Hawick at the top. Meaningless, of course, because of the playoffs. 72 points. Marr, 62. Currie, 60. Kelso, 47. Edinburgh Accies, 46. Heriot's Blues, 45. Musselburgh, 45. Selkirk, 35. Glasgow Hawks, 26. And Jedforest, 5. So that's the Premiership table as it stands, with only a couple of games left. Don't forget, Hawick have 1 game left. Marr, Currie and Kelso and Heriot's Blues have all got 2 to play. Edinburgh Accies just the 1. And so this week it's Currie against Edinburgh Accies. Let's start with that.
Yeah, well, I think you look at that one, and Edinburgh Accies off the back of 2 difficult performances. So obviously a draw against Kelso, which they probably should have won in the end. Weren't in the game for half an hour, and then probably started to build into it, missed an easy kickable conversion, and then a defeat against Selkirk. So, they're 2 difficult games. Playing Currie is a completely different kettle of fish as well, because, Kelso are a stuffy side who are punching above their weight in the league. A lot of talented players, but they've taken all those teams by surprise, and I love seeing it as well. So, they've muscled their way into a real good position in the table, but then playing against a Selkirk side who are quite expansive, a good set of forwards, but good in the backs as well. But playing Currie, they've just got that all-round package. I think Edinburgh Accies will struggle to live with them up front, especially if it's quite clatchy like it is outside just now. They'll struggle at Millennium. So you've got to say that Currie, with their eye on trying to build a bit of momentum into a huge game as well, they'll be looking to make sure that they can try and nail down that second position.
We see that in Border derbies, of course. This is an Edinburgh derby, and we've seen some ding-dongs between the 2 in the past.
Yeah, I think they're 2 teams which played different brands of rugby. Even Edinburgh Accies, when they were getting a bit of dominance up front against Kelso, probably after like the 30-35 minute mark, they still look to play really expansive, and I just think sometimes that's in your fabric as a club. So and Currie are very attritional. They like to rumble up front. They like to use their big powerful pack, and I don't think it doesn't really matter what guys they're in, because they've got different personnel from different areas now. Currie are not, a local team, but they do attract a certain type of brand of player, and they're very confrontational up front. So they're two teams which potentially clash. So it could be a bit down to weather as well this weekend. But I think if I was a betting man, I was to gamble, and I know what you're going to say, but I'd go with Currie, which means that Edinburgh Accies are going to win away from home.
Okay, so who's going to finish second so that we can put our bets elsewhere?
I think that's probably, it's as tough as one to call as who's going to finish in fourth, because obviously it was a tight battle at Fullerton when Marr played Currie, and that's going to be the reverse fixture to decide who's going to finish in second spot, which then means one of those sides can get home advantage to play the other team again. So there's a lot riding on that. If Marr are able to win away from home, or at least get a points tally which stops Currie, that if they get themselves in a position where they can stop Currie going above them, the point advantage is going in Currie's favour as well. So hugely, if they were to get 4 points and Currie and Marr just get 2, Currie would potentially leapfrog them. So it's an interesting game, and it's too hard to call. I think that one, Currie home advantage, but Marr have upset the odds at Millennia before, so really difficult one to call that.
Heriot's Blues will be playing Glasgow Hawks. That's happening at Goldenacre. It's the penultimate match for Heriot's. Hawks, of course, have gone through a few hard times recently. They haven't won for a long time. They've played 15, so they've got 3 still to go. In fact, their last one will be 2nd of March against Jedforest. But what does Coach Andy Hill have to say this week?
Saturday was an incredibly disappointing game for us. I personally felt as if we were probably the better of the two teams on the day. Scored a lot of good tries, scored 3 first phase tries, which is hard to do against an organised defence. Just some good analysis by the boys and ourselves that thought we could identify gaps in Musselburgh we managed to exploit and score off of. But at the same time, our own discipline killed us. The penalty count went against us, whereby it allowed Musselburgh to get easy field position by kicking to the corner, and from that they managed to score 2 rolling maul tries, another which was collapsed just short, and then they managed to get a pick and go over the line, and then another one which was just a blast round the corner. So it was, I feel as if when you look at the styles of play, we're looking to try and play a real good brand of rugby within that, and at the moment we're just not getting the results, and it was even more disappointing that we were in a position to win it. Scored with about 3 or 4 minutes to go, and from that we get penalised from the kick-off for an extra roll on the ground when, on review, I think it's a pretty harsh call, but that's just the way things go for you when you're at the bottom of the table, I feel. This week we come up against Heriot's, a team who we've played a lot of over the years, and a team that we know quite well. It was obviously a different Heriot side. They're still gunning for top 4 within that, and this weekend obviously brings its challenges with the Six Nations kicking off and a number of our boys going down to Wales to support the national team. So with that there'll be a few changes, and the difficulty part of it all is the dreaded front row ones, whereby it's very hard to find front rows at all at the moment in Scottish rugby, and finding good ones is even harder. But this weekend we've managed to coax Gary Strain out of retirement to come and try and play to get the first 15 game going ahead, just with the number of injuries what we've had basically post-Christmas within that, and guys that are unavailable this weekend. So there'll be a few changes probably from the weekend, but Finn Callaghan will most likely move to the wing with James Pinkerton back, and then in the forwards, as I say, Gary Strain will come onto the bench, as will Aaron Burgess. Paul Cairncross, who was a big loss when he went off at half time on Saturday, looks as if he's made a bit of recovery, as has Max Crumlish, who went off about 50-55 minutes into the game. Both seem to have recovered from their knocks at the weekend, so hopefully they manage to get through training tomorrow night. Heriot's play a good brand of rugby. We know it'll be a tough game. They've obviously got a lot to play for, so they know we're going to be gunning for us, particularly having us beating them earlier on in the season. So we know this is going to be a really difficult game, but we know, as I've said before, if we play the right brand of rugby and we get on the right side of a defensive display and the referees' decisions, whereby us keeping ourselves along and the referees' good books as well, then I'm sure at some point this losing run is going to end.
So Glasgow Hawks going to Goldenacre, they're not going to find that one easy either.
No, I think Heriot's played well against against Hawick, there was large phases of the game where they were actually the better side, to be honest. And I think, when they did eventually get their try, it was an error that probably gave Hawick an early entry back into the game. You're never ever going to give Hawick the ball back 5 metres away from your own goal line, off a restart. So, Heriot's, they play a really good brand of rugby. They always have. Their Premiership team is probably not too far a relation from what their Super Series play. It's really forward orientated, but they've got really good backs as well. They've tried to use a bit of width at times. Townsend, really passes the ball quite flat across that line to allow his runners to come onto the ball and try and get over that gain line. So they were impressive. They played rugby in the right areas as well. I think Townsend is growing as a 10. He's starting to show a little bit more influence and a little bit more development, which is nice to see. Especially with Graham Wilson inside him as well. So, that was...
That's still playing, isn't he? Fantastic.
Yeah.
But he's playing at a high standard as well, and that's the thing. I mean, he didn't look out of place at all. He didn't look over the hill. I mean, he's 35, 36 years old?
Yeah, I think, he's got an evident limp now, and he's got a heavily strapped, I think, left knee, but it's just his influence and being able to just... He's got an engine on him. He always gets to the breakdown as a good scrum half. He's usually kind of first, second there, just to kind of survey the scene. And he's got a really good box kick. So, I think Hawks will find this challenging, and it's almost just a matter for Hawks of getting through the season. I think the interesting thing that I've always alluded to in terms of Hawks is how they have to kind of refresh their squad every season. They're probably fortunate that Jedforest have been in the division this year, and it gives them an early opportunity to look at what they're going to do next year, because they don't want to be in the same position, because with Ayr coming up, I think it's a little bit more even in terms of all those sides that potentially could be dragged into a bit of a dogfight. So yeah, it's going to be difficult for Hawks to go to Heriot's and pick up a victory, especially when Heriot's have the incentive of trying to squeeze into fourth place.
Musselburgh against Marr is another fixture at the weekend. Let's hear from Marr's head coach, Kenny Diffenthal.
Great to finally get some rugby played. Guys worked really hard for 80 minutes, which is good. You could see that they were eager to put in a performance. Fair play to Jed for sticking in the game for 80 minutes. This week's another tough week. Musselburgh obviously pushing for that fourth spot, and us trying to keep that second spot. So yeah, it's going to be another tough game at Musselburgh, but we're looking forward to the challenge. Boys are prepped well after getting 80 minutes of rugby under their belt, so we look forward to going to Musselburgh for a big challenge, which we will meet head on.
Musselburgh against Marr, that was Kenny Diffenthal's thoughts, and Musselburgh, obviously, last chance saloon for them. They have to get 5 points and then hope that other teams do them a favour, and Marr, of course, wanting that home semi-final.
Yeah, and it's a difficult game to go to Musselburgh, but their last encounter against one of the teams in the top four, Musselburgh failed to score any points at home. So, Marr will be going there with a little bit of confidence, knowing that they've probably, if anything, Musselburgh might be staring down the barrel, knowing that their season's actually done. So, last chance saloon for Musselburgh. They'll be hoping to try and pick up 5 points, but it's going to take a big turn in terms of the lie of the land to see any of the teams above them slipping up and not getting any sort of points. So, obviously I think they'll jump above Edinburgh Accies. They could potentially finish above them, but I think it's still up to Kelso and Heriot's into the fourth place. So yeah, Marr know that they probably can't leave Stoneyhill without getting 5 points, I think, this weekend.
Jedforest against Kelso, the first of the two border derbies for this week. We're going to hear from Neil Hinnigan, Director of Rugby at Kelso, and first David Grieve, Coach of Jedforest.
On Saturday we were up at Marr, and it was fair to say it was a tough day at the office. It was quite a big scoreline against us, but I think the most disappointing thing was we only took 16 players up. We had 16 players available, and we've used 48 players this season, and to have 16 available, it was quite it's a new low for us. I think it wasn't good, but the boys that went up there, fair play to them, they got stuck in. We had two back row players playing centre, and to be fair, nothing came down the middle, but when it goes a bit wider, we're obviously going to get caught out. So this week we've got Kelso, a big local derby, and I think probably this derby, like Kelso are flying high. I think we're probably going to be the biggest underdogs it's been between Jed and Kelso, so there's obviously no pressure on us. We should be back to 20 players this week. and we just have to go out and try and just get tore into Kelso and hopefully take something for the game.
Yeah, we'll make the short 10-mile trip to Riverside Park on Saturday to take on Jed. Be a typical border derby. It'll be a hard march. Jed will be, they'll have everybody back, have all the players available for this, I'm sure, and they'll be looking to put a bit of shine on their season. It's not been the greatest season for the club, but we will be giving them our full respect, because every Jed Kelso game is meaningful and they're always difficult. We were delighted earlier in the season to beat them at Poinder. It was the first game for a long time between the two clubs, and it was been sorely missed. So the guys are looking forward to another big match, another big challenge up at Jed, and I'm sure there'll be another big crowd. So yeah, the players have just got to, soak up the atmosphere and get into the game as quick as we can and try and impose ourselves on Jed, and I'm sure they'll be doing the same for us against us. So it's one to look forward to.
Let's deal with Neil Hinnigan's comments first of all, talking about the excitement between the two clubs of having a league board derby. And now, obviously, after this season, it's going to be taken away from them because Jed are relegated. And then with regard to Jedforest, 80-10 at Marr on paper looks absolutely horrendous. But when you see the facts behind it, they went up to Fullerton Park with just 16 players for a Premiership side. As he said, it's a new low there. I find what he has to say there quite sad.
Yeah, I find it quite sad, but it's a sign of the way that season's went, and I think perhaps with injury and key personnel missing, the appetite to go to Fullerton Park is it's not really an attractive one, is it? So your injuries or your niggles get that much sorer, thinking that I really don't want to play, and it is a new low. But I do think Jed have an opportunity to press the reset button, and they're going to drop down a division. We don't want to see a team like Jedforest drop again. But it means that they need these players to come back. When we're saying about like Robert Hogg coming back and contributing towards his club, he's as much as it's great to see him back, he's not going to be the answer in terms of getting them back up through the leagues or maintaining position over the next kind of 5-10 years. That's up to the next generation, and obviously the director of rugby, whoever that will be, that's up for them to make sure that Jedforest don't capitulate now, and they can learn from what's happened this season and perhaps consolidate in National 1 and then build again, because I think Jedforest are an ambitious club from their history, and they'll see themselves as hitters at the top table in the Premiership.
Well, because of the Kelso result last week and the fact that Hawick have just about achieved the top of the table, there's more of a story, obviously, with this game now, which is why we've chosen it as our main commentary match. Can't be much arguments about that. And, of course, Jed v Kelso is still a big local derby for those teams just 10 miles away.
Yeah, and as you say, it was great to see it back in the Premiership, and we spoke about it last year, when it got to the end of National 1 and we knew that Kelso were going to be going up. We looked at the teams and we went, next season we've got Hawick, Selkirk, Jed and Kelso in the Premiership. So 40% of the teams in that division are borderers, and it's great. Obviously that's now less, but we knew that game was going to be a great double header. And the first game was at Poinder. It was really well attended, great appetite for it. I do think that this will be exactly the same. It'll be well attended. It'll be a challenging game for Kelso, because it's not a game that they're going to be able to control as easily as they perhaps would another game, a different game in this division, because Jed will be stuffy, but Kelso, realistically, with the way that this season's went for Jed and the way that their season's been going, Kelso, they have to be targeting 5 points from this as well.
Well, you and Robin will be covering that game with Hugh Brown pitchside at Riverside on Saturday. The other big derby, of course, Selkirk against Hawick. The Bill McLaren Shield is at stake in that one. Let's hear from both coaches, Matty Douglas, and first from Selkirk, Sesh Henderson.
Last week's game, look, really pleased with the energy we put in that performance. It's not easy being off for 6 weeks and continually training, but the guys really fronted up against a strong Accies side. Kind of scores when they scored, we scored type of game, but when it mattered, we dug deep in our defence, and when we scored some 2 or 3 really good team tries. So it's again, we trained well Tuesday night, and we're really looking forward to another a big challenge. Obviously Hawick this week. say no more about Hawick. They're a very good side, but that's a challenge for us. You know, we're buzzing to get out our own park and put a performance in for 80 minutes and push them all the way. This week we've got Josh Welsh back. He's been on holiday the last couple of weeks, so he'll come into the squad at some point during the game. So, you know, our backs are really playing with confidence just now, and, you know, Josh will bring something else to that as well. He's a lot of experience. The forwards are giving the backs front foot ball, you know, really quick contacts, good set piece last weekend as well. You know, if we get good contact, good set piece this week, then, you know, we're gonna create scoring chances. We just more have the mindset and the patience and the discipline to take them, and hopefully that's what we'll bring to the game on Saturday. Really excited, looking forward to also play well for 80 minutes, but also try and defend the Bob McLaren Shield, which is important to the club.
Finally, we look towards the last league game of the season. It's been another fantastic season as we go into Selkirk this weekend. I think, looking at it, we know exactly what's needed to finish a second consecutive season at the top of the table after our kind of slow start, obviously at Marr, where we got, you know, that defeat that we were well beaten, and since then, yes, there's been odd blips in performances, but I have to credit the players. They're the ones who have put the hard work in, and that's why we're where we are. These boys work extremely hard, not just for us as coaches, but for each other. So I'll be first to admit that Saturday wasn't quite where I thought it would be. I thought I was expecting another big performance away from home. There's been a lot of talk around that we scraped the win, etc. And yes, first half I would admit that we were quite a bit off it. Heriot's had the upper hand, but 7-5 at half time. We go in and we come out and we win the game in the next 20 minutes. Two quick tries, especially the try right after the break. That's what we're about. The energy was just missing in the first half, and the players know that. They're not silly. We've been in these pressured situations. We knew how much was at stake. Heriot's pushing for a top 4. The week before, Musselburgh is pushing for a top 4, and the week before we have a top of the table clash. Our running hasn't been easy, and we finish with our last away game of the season. But look, we got over the line on Saturday, and at the end of the day, the win goes to us. Doesn't matter if we didn't play great for 60 minutes. Sometimes you have to win ugly, and we will definitely head into this weekend with confidence. But look, Selkirk are a side that in the last couple of weeks have been putting some quality performances together, and I think that, you know, a big credit has to go to their coaching team. And Sesh, as a new coach coming in, I was the same. You bring a style of play, different systems, and it takes a bit of time to adapt. And watching their game back from Saturday, they're in a really good place. So look, we need to be better than we were on Saturday, but there's not a lot to fix. It's just up top with us, and we need to, you know, really go to Philip off and put a performance in. I think we know what's needed to finish top of the table, and look, we are focused this week. We had a brilliant session last night. I thought the boys worked extremely hard, a lot of contact in there, and look, we'll be ready to go for a border derby. It's a different, you know, proposition to play in a city side, so we need to make sure that we do the hard yards, get the nuts and bolts right. And, you know, bottom line is that these games between the two of us haven't been a lot of points in it. I think the last 9 minutes at Mansfield earlier in the season is where we got our gains, and we just want to really finish the season off on a high and put us in the best possible situation going into the playoffs. We have a game next Friday against Peebles, and then into the playoffs. So look, we're extremely looking forward to it. Again, I've got another strong squad to pick from. We will welcome back Dalton Redpath and Fraser Wilson, both into the selection process. Look, I could make excuses for our set piece, but last weekend it wasn't where it needed to be. The boys know that, but I feel any team that we put out, that they're capable to, you know, fulfil their role. So we'll be looking to fix our set piece going into Saturday, and, you know, apart from that, I've got another full squad to pick from. So business end of the season, and we'll look to be putting the strongest team available in the park. And again, it's a border derby. There's a lot at stake, and we'll head to Selkirk this weekend with some confidence and know that we're going to have to be at our best to get any sort of result.
Well, Hawick won the Norman Sudden Memorial Shield last weekend. They can get another shield this weekend. Do you think they will?
I think they probably, again, going to this as favourites. It'll be another difficult game, and Selkirk over the last few years have been, you know, a difficult opponent for Hawick in some of the games in the previous seasons that we've had. So, you know, obviously Selkirk are hitting a little bit of form as well. I think a win on the road against Edinburgh Accies is not an easy it's not an easy place to travel to, but Selkirk have obviously, got that victory. They picked up the victory against Musselburgh away from home as well, to win that Bill McLaren Shield, and now they've got a chance to defend it. I think that, you'd probably be looking at Hawick to go into this as favourites and really just nail down and take any doubt out of anybody's mind that they're going to finish top, of the table, ahead of the playoffs and ahead of the obviously they get that home advantage for all the games should they go all the way. But it's going to be a difficult game for them. Selkirk are obviously a bit buoyant and playing better rugby without the pressures off.
Premiership rounded up there quite nicely. Let's move to National 1 and the results from last weekend. Biggar 36, Watsonians 28, Gala 42, Glasgow Accies 39, Highland 35, Ayr 12, Melrose 26, Dundee 38, and the game that was played on the Friday night, GHK 25, GHA 30.
Yeah, I think obviously all high-scoring games, in every single one there, and Biggar with a good win against Watsonians, who have been hitting a bit of form. But you look at other games as well. Gala, Glasgow Accies, high-scoring. Gala came out on top at home, but Ayr defeated again. I think they've certainly taken their foot off the gas in that division and suffered with a little bit of injury. But the big game, you've got to look at that in terms of Dundee winning away from home at the Greenyards. I did say last week that Melrose were favourites going into that. They had to be winning those games. Dundee sitting second bottom, and they've conceded almost 40 points against a team who have found it difficult to score that tally this season. So obviously it's disappointing for Melrose, because it means that they drop a place in that division, and Dundee, they get a little bit of breathing room between themselves and GHK. Yes, they've got that game in hand as well, and of course GHA beating GHK at Old Annisland under the lights on the Friday night. Close game. GHK did pick up a couple of points with 4 tries and also getting to within 7 points there, but Dundee trumped them with 5. Yeah, I think that's the important thing, and we said that last week in terms of Dundee will know what job they've got to do going into the weekend because of that Friday game. Because the Glasgow Derby was played on the Friday night. Dundee knew exactly what was required of them, and they've done it in brilliant fashion to get that 5 points. So the National 1 table then, Ayr done and dusted before Christmas, 74 points. Highland move into second place, 51, Melrose 50, GHA 46, Watsonians 45, Glasgow Accies 41, Biggar 39, Gala 39, Dundee 24 with that game in hand, GHK 21. And we were discussing who's it going to go down, Dundee or GHK, and I think last week we thought GHK would probably have the edge. Now it's all changed. Yeah, it's all changing. Obviously, it means that the kind of this weekend is where some of those games in hand will narrow. Obviously the kind of standby dates that are there. And Dundee have a huge game. Obviously, the first one up on top of the fixture list is against Gala, and they've got home advantage. So Dundee will know that they've got a free swing here, and they'll be able to hopefully try and pick up some points, and it'll give them a lot more of a gap between themselves and GHK, which means that pressure's onto GHK after that. So no game for Ayr or GHK this weekend, but Dundee, they're at home to Gala, which suddenly becomes hugely important. Dundee 3 points clear and a game in hand on GHK, their chance to improve on that. But let's hear from Gala's point of view after a good win against Glasgow Accies last weekend. Director of Rugby, Ewan Swinton.
Our game against Glasgow Accies last Saturday went pretty much according to plan, to be honest. Both sides were throwing the ball about with gay abandon and scoring tries fairly freely. I think a feature that frustrated Accies was that whenever they got their noses in front, we were able to come right back at them with real vigour and purpose, and showed some tremendous forward breaches. Glenn Brock was very good in that respect. Liam Scott scored a couple of tremendous tries, but one of which was a great team effort from our own half. And Ben Gill out in the wing was showing his strength in heavy traffic and getting over for a brace himself. It was also good to see Scott Beffers back at standoff, asserting some real authority into the game and bringing his kicking game to play as well, which was very useful in terms of the final result. So yeah, a really good performance. It was a great game of rugby for the neutral, a little heart-stopping for those of us who had a vested interest, but really good entertainment and a good advert for Nat 1 Rugby. So we head up to Mayfield on Saturday to play Dundee. missing a few guys due to trips to Wales. We have a number of our frontline players heading down there, and they're even taking their own kit man and the redoubtable Heppy with them. So good luck to them. Hope they enjoy their weekend. But that will give an opportunity to a few of the young guns and second team players to step up and make their mark. They'll do so in a game where we are not under any pressure at all, and that's often quite a nice way to be approaching a game. Dundee obviously are still under a wee bit of pressure in that they need a few points yet to secure their place in Nat 1 for next season. So we will be no pressure, they'll be under a bit of pressure. That's not a bad scenario to play a game of rugby. So we'll head up to Dundee with hopefully the return of Richie Mitchell. It would be nice if we can have Murray Wilson back as well, but I know he's still struggling a little with a foot injury. But final selection is still to be determined as I speak. But we'll head up with lots of confidence, looking forward to a good game of rugby, and we will see where it ends up.
Ewan Swinton, Director of Rugby at Gala. So Dundee on a bit of a roll, Gala getting a good performance there. It's all happening at Mayfield. What's your thoughts on that one? Because you thought last week Melrose would beat them. What about this week?
Yeah, but I'm not being lured into that trap. Only Ian Chisholm can lure me into that trap. And yeah, I think, obviously it's one of those games that Dundee, again, they've got something to play for. Gala, they don't really. Home advantage, Dundee will be hoping that they can probably capitalise on some of Gala's patchy and different form, especially on the road. Gala seem to have played better at Netherdale, which is no surprise that a team plays well at home. But certainly Gala, on the road, it's a game that Dundee, if you look at the table, position-wise, they're not too far away in terms of points tally. There's a bit between them, but Dundee, you would imagine, see if they could get a win this weekend. You've got to say GHK are probably going to be relegated into that too.
GHA are taking on Biggar at Braidholme this weekend. Biggar, a good win over Watsonians at home, and it's hard to believe, isn't it, when we were talking about them after about 6 or 7 games, they hadn't won anything, and now look at them and they're up to 39 points in the league.
Yeah, they've had a good turn, and I think that they needed to get away from that bottom, because you think that they don't pick up 3 of those victories, especially like say that narrow one against Watsonians there. They're still towards that foot of that table. They've had a good turn, and I think that it's what it needed at Hartree Mill, and it's good to see, because at the beginning of the season, the way that Biggar have been over the last few years, we thought they might have been there or thereabouts, but it just happens that they had some bad injuries, they lost key personnel, things just weren't going right for them, but they've been able to turn it around, and they can obviously start building towards next year, but they've obviously still got some games to fulfil. Got
to pay tribute to Ian Notman as well, who's done wonders for Biggar, and I think he's hanging up his coaching hat at the end of the season.
Yeah, obviously he's been a huge contributor to Biggar over the last few years, and it's just those key personnel, and it's clubs being able to replenish that and fill that gap when people move on. And some clubs have struggled with that in the past. I think you look at teams like Howe Fife, when they've had good coaches and good players come through, it's who can future. You look at Jed, perhaps, who can future proof that, and obviously if he's hanging up his coaching hat, then obviously they'll need somebody else to come in and fill that void. But it's a good opportunity for somebody to make an impact, because I think Biggar are flattered to deceive this season, and they'll certainly want to be up towards the top of the table next year.
Well, that looks like a tasty little fixture, as does Glasgow Accies against Highland at New Annisland.
Yeah, obviously two teams that a few weeks ago, maybe 5-6 games ago, certainly we were talking about them in a promotion chase, trying to cling on to air, but Glasgow Accies have certainly fallen off more than what Highland have.
Mind you, they do have a lot of games in hand. They've only played 14 so far, so 2 less than Highland. And in such a close division as it is at the moment, I mean, if they win those 2 games with bonus points, that suddenly they're second.
Yeah, it's true. They've had a good season in terms of coming up from National 2. They've competed really well, but this is a game that it'll certainly be another leveler for them to see where they are, because there'll be another team focusing on next year. They're probably sitting in the position going, well, actually, do you know what? This league isn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be, so they can start to build. And it's difficult because we talk about the leagues. The Premiership, certainly the Borders teams all kind of cut each other's throats, as do the Edinburgh teams. In this league, in next year, I think, the likes of Glasgow Accies and GHA, they'll probably be glad that GHK are going down, because it's one less Glasgow derby, and they can, focus on that one big game, and the rest is just about managing managing those fixtures as and when they come. But obviously this weekend Glasgow Accies will be wanting to try and get that victory, but Highland had a good win against Ayr last weekend, so they'll want to try and consolidate and finish in second place in the division.
The other match, Watsonians against Melrose. Watsonians are actually protecting a home unbeaten run at the moment. Let's hear from Ian Chisholm from Melrose.
Obviously hugely disappointed after last week's home defeat to Dundee. I just got the feeling that they were far hungrier than us, and obviously they had something to play for, and we've talked right the way throughout the year about trying to motivate the guys, but look, I don't think there's any excuse. I think you're wearing a Melrose jersey, you're playing in the green yards, that's motivation enough for you to go out and do well. Again, it's been a real trend right the way throughout the season of when I come on here and I talk about us being really good with the ball and maybe struggling a little bit when the ball's off the field in dead time, and then beating ourselves around penalties, and that was the trend of the game. Look, fair play to Dundee. They had done a bit of homework, especially around how they wanted to defend us. I think they were pretty passive in their tackle, which allowed them to get on ball a lot. And I think there was probably a bit of complacency in there, like just looking that, taking our experience from the game up at Mayfield, and how it was a relatively cruisy win for us up there. And you always have to come with the same level of effort and same level of intensity, and you're just rewarded by more or less points on the scoreboard. And it was frustrating as hell to see us in that second half after losing a few scores, 1 through our indiscipline and 2 through just doing really dumb stuff. So looking forward to Watsons. They've not been beat at Mireside for a long time. I know Jace, he's pretty proud of that record as well. So we're absolutely going up to, first of all, get a reaction that the jersey and the club deserves. But second of all, we pretty keen to stop this win and run. Watsons, just like us, they'll be looking to push their way up the table and cement in second place. And look, it probably doesn't help that Ayr are losing to everybody at the moment. But look, job's done for them. You can totally understand that. And no, it wasn't me that texted Grant Anderson, just to let you know. But yeah, look, we'll be going into Saturday full of energy. We're going to pick the team that's going to most effectively play our systems, and that might ruffle a few feathers. But I think agitating your players every now and again is good. And the thing for us is that players need to start not taking things personally and understand that coaches never select based on, well, maybe some do, but I don't select based on personal grievances or anything like that. It's always what's best for the team and always what we think is going to move the boat faster. And for us as a group, there's been a bit of a trend over the last few seasons with Melrose where they'll have really positive performances and then lose one that they shouldn't. And look, if that trend's going right now, we'll have a few positive performances and then hopefully Dundee's been our dip, and then we'll have another really positive performance here. And if everybody can execute their roles within our systems, within our processes, and the score's going to take care of itself. But we need to make sure that as a coaching group, we're not having to coach effort and intent. That should be driven by the players. And look, for me, we're excited to get back in the park as always, and I'm positive that we're going to get a good result up at Mireside.
So Ian then ruled himself out of the mystery of who sent that text to Grant Anderson.
No, I think he's hunting for an alibi. I think he's public enemy number one for sending that message, definitely.
Let's have a look at National 2 then. Falkirk 49, Kirkcaldy 35, Gordonians 27, Aberdeen Grammar 8, Peebles 54, Berwick 13, Stumel 28, Newton Stewart. Well, it's either 25 or 27. It was 27 on Saturday. I see it's been adjusted on the SIU website, so maybe that was a 3-point win instead of a 1-point win, but a win nevertheless for Stumel. Stirling County 27, Lasswade 34. Some interesting ones there. Falkirk and Peebles obviously getting the 5 points, which means that they're still very much top of the table, but just the 1 point separating the two sides. So it's kind of who blinks first on that one. Gordonians again winning the Aberdeen Derby for the second time this season. Aberdeen Grammar desperate for points, not getting any, which was good news for Berwick, who got pretty hammered at Peebles. I really didn't see that scoreline coming, 54 24 points to 13. Stoneyhill very pleased to get a win against Newton Stewart, a team above them. That hasn't happened too many times in the last couple of seasons, and Lasswade just getting over the line against Stirling County.
I think after last weekend you probably can look at this division, and then leading into this weekend shows a lot, because Peebles' result was really strong. I think it's come at a cost, and Falkirk I think still are favourites for me to go up from this division. The Peebles are losing some key personnel potentially this weekend. Obviously we'll get a bit more information from Graham Patterson, but I think they're key personnel, which means that if you look at the result for Stirling between Lasswade, it's a difficult game for Lasswade. They managed to get away with a victory. It was obviously a score was in it, but it shows the challenge that Peebles have. Now I think that going to Bridgehaw is going to be a really, really difficult game for Peebles. I think they've got 3 really challenging games left. Kirkcaldy, Aberdeen Grammar and Stirling County are really difficult games, where I think that does put the advantage towards Falkirk. The benefit for Peebles is obviously the fact that they do have a really handsome advantage now in their points tally because of that victory against Berwick. But for me, Falkirk again getting a good victory against Kirkcaldy, I still think they're potentially favourites to go up from this division.
Well, only 3 games in that division this weekend. Let's start with Falkirk against Berwick, and we'll hear what Paul Pringle, forwards coach of Berwick, has to say this week.
Just going back to the weekend past against Peebles, which, you know, obviously they're up there competing with Falkirk for the promotion place. A really tough day for us. We started really, really well, playing exactly the type of rugby we wanted. Unfortunately, we just didn't take those early chances. And I think probably the difference between the top and the bottom of the league is that ability to convert those opportunities. Credit where it's due to Peebles, you know, they really were clinical, you know. I think we had 15 minutes of sustained pressure. We had 1 drop ball and they were away and under the post. So, you know, hats off to them, and you can definitely see why they are where they are in the league. We certainly wish them all the best for the rest of the season. In terms of where we are and where we move on to now, so it's a tough game against Falkirk. We're under no illusions there. We've got pretty much just about the same squad. We welcome back Ben Nicholson, which is great. James Grieve, who's been away for a number of months. He goes. He's got other sports, so it's great to have James back, though he was really dominant in the first start of the season for us. So we are getting a couple of the boys back, which is great. It'll be a tough game, but really, you know, we aim, as always, is to try and get something on the road if possible. But looking forward, it's all about those 3 home games to finish the season for us, you know. We don't want to be relying on other teams doing us favours or results elsewhere. We managed to get control of that with our win at home against Aberdeen, and we would just want to, you know, keep that within our hands and get the wins that require to stay in the league going forward.
There's a big exception to what I'm about to say, obviously being the Peebles result, but Berwick on the road this season have not been too bad. They've run some of the bigger teams quite close. Yeah,
they have, and you know, again, this is one of those games that if Falkirk are able to get a bit of parity up front, that they've got the backs that can cut open any team in this division. It's about getting that, you know, winning that battle up front. And I think last week does show that as well, that although they were able to put almost 50 points on Kirkcaldy, they did concede 35. You know, and that's the difficulty with Falkirk, is the fact that if they allow a team with a big pack and that can rumble on and make the game slightly, unattractive at times, you know, they can fall into little dangerous traps, which we've seen against like the Lasswade. You know, obviously they're a team that have been able to turn Falkirk over this season as well. So, and Peebles have got a dominant pack, just not able to get their backs firing. So if Berwick can target them up front, they could potentially get a bit of joy, but they're going to have to really keep their backs under wraps this weekend. Stoneyhill will be playing Gordonians this week. It's interesting when we go through the National 2 table shortly, the north-south divide there, but Stuart Melville did manage to get a result over Newton Stewart. They'll be looking to get a result over Gordonians as well. Let's hear from Stoneyhill head coach Alex Haggart.
We were absolutely delighted to get the win against Newton Stewart. They're a really good side. I think we mentioned it before, but we love playing against them. They throw up so many threats, and they've got some brilliant players, and it was a really good win for us. And I think I mentioned on Saturday when I spoke to you after the game that that was quite a big win for us, because that's the first time in a good few years now that we've beaten a team who are above us. obviously struggling in that one previous season. Like, we didn't get many opportunities. And then this year, you know, we've beaten kind of everyone around us, but we haven't really beaten anyone above us. And if anything, beside, I think, one game against Peebles, we haven't really put in a performance against others. Whereas this time out, you know, we did that. I thought we controlled good portions of the game. I thought we won the set piece battle. I think we nicked a scrum or two. And then I thought our defensive line out work deep into the second half really was outstanding. And that was something that the boys had said that they wanted to do, was they wanted to put a wee bit of pressure on Newton Stewart and use our organisation against their kind of fluid, sort of open attacking play. So I was really proud of them for what they did on Saturday. And it's also quite nice as well. I don't think we were ever really kind of in the mire as such, but I think securing mathematical safety is also a massive boost for the boys, and it just means that the sun seems to be shining a wee bit more and the wind's not as bad and all that kind of stuff now, which is good. So looking forward to Gordonians this weekend. We know what to expect. I mean, I think they started the season rapidly. They've kind of tapered off, and looks like they're on a 50% kind of win rate. I think it'll be a good game. I think what we need to try and do, and I think the big thing that we're going to be looking at this week, is controlling transitions. Gordonians are a team who are brilliant off set piece and off transitions. And I think I noticed when we played them last time out, like when we held the ball for long periods of time, we created chances. And the flip side of that was when we gave the ball away, we gave them all of their chances. So I think that's something that we're really going to be looking at this week, is that we know, you know, we're playing Nat 2 rugby. We know errors are going to happen, but we're going to be looking at how we can recover from them as quickly as possible and how we can get into shape as quickly as possible. And likewise, if Gordonians are going to make mistakes and we can force them into mistakes, what we do with that as well. So yeah, look, it'll be a good game. I'm sure Gordonians will be coming down right up for it as well, especially off the back of a pretty comprehensive win against Grammar at the weekend just there. But you know, we've got an opportunity, our last home game of the season, to finish in Inverleith on a bit of a high.
Alex Haggart, always waxing lyrical there, and obviously very happy with last week's result, and another home match for him this week.
Yeah, another home match, and they'll be hoping as well that they can back up that performance. And I think he knows as well as anybody else that Stoneyhill over the last few years have been a bit patchy in terms of their performances, and not really been able to go on that run of consistency to put a bit of pressure on and build momentum in a league campaign. But that was a good victory, and for him as well, saying that against a team above them, and they've only really been able to compete against another team in a similar position all season. So that's the positivity in that Stuart's Melville will be looking to try and take forward. And this is a game that they're closer in terms of the league position, so something at home that they can probably go into this with a bit of confidence, a bit of spring in their step, and they'll be hoping to get another victory, which should obviously take them a bit closer to the 5th position.
Well, the other match in National 2 is Stirling County against Peebles, match being played at Bridge Hall. We're going to hear from Graham Patterson, head coach of Peebles, and first the head coach of Stirling, that's Craig Deacons.
Saturday against Last Wave, it was an interesting game, certainly a game of two halves to be honest, but we got off to a really good start at the beginning of the game. It was 3-0 for the first 10 to 12 minutes. It was really close for both teams, there wasn't much in it, and then we were actually camped in the Last Wave 22, gave a silly penalty away, and then on the bounce of 3 penalties in a row, we found ourselves underneath our own posts, just from poor discipline from our point of view. And then from there on, for the rest of the first half, our penalty count was ridiculous, just wasn't acceptable. I think we gave 14 penalties away in that sort of 25 minute sort of patch. And at half time, we found ourselves 24-3 down. And to be credit to Last Wade, they punished us for our costly penalties we were giving away. They hit us into the corner, they just sort of bullied us up front that way. And to be fair, they didn't really have to do very much for their scores, to be honest with you. There wasn't much rugby getting played, it was just our poor discipline. Had a chat about it at half time, and thankfully we managed to come into the second half, cut our penalties massively down, kept hold of the ball. We managed to put 4 scores on in the second half. We came away with the 2 bonus points at the end, which is obviously a big positive. When you're looking at half time, 24-3 down to finish the game, they ended up being 34-27. Frustrating, one of them games that the players are saying if there'd been another 5 minutes in the game, we might have got another score. but the reality is the damage was done in the first half. It's a frustrating one because it's been quite a common theme for us this season, to be honest. We've not managed to stay in the hunt for 80 minutes. I know it's rugby at the end of the day and teams get put under pressure, and in the heat of the moment mistakes happen or penalties are given away. But the big thing for me, learning and saying to our boys, is take it out take the decision away from the referee. Don't put yourself in these situations to allow the referee to blow a whistle. And whether you think you're right or wrong, we'd just rather take that away. But the thing for me is, it's pretty positive at the moment, because a couple of weeks ago we watched Kirkcaldy. It's only a couple of points in that game. One of them ones that we maybe could have and should have won that game. Last week in the weekend, it was down to 7 points. So we're kind of building a wee bit of momentum at the moment. There's a good spirit about the boys because we know we can go out there and score points. We know we can threaten teams. And if we put it together for 80 minutes, we are going to look quite threatening. So we played Peebles earlier on in the season down there. It was a tough place to go down there, and I think we got beat by 13 points at the end of the game. It was 28-15. Obviously they've been on a really good ride the rest of the season. They've been picking up some good wins. They're sitting top of the table. It's looking quite tasty and interesting as regards to what's going to happen with the top 3 or 4 teams at the moment. But I know for me, all the pressure's on Peebles coming to Bridge Hall this weekend. They know they need a bonus point win to keep themselves ahead of Falkirk. I think there's really a point in that. But for me, it's giving our boys the free rein to actually go out there and play 80 minutes of rugby that we know we can do. And if we do that, actually we'll get our just rewards. Selection this weekend, it'll be pretty consistent for what the team we put out last week. There was no real injuries. The only thing, we've got a couple of boys going down to watch the international game down in Wales, so it's given an opportunity for a few other guys to come back in the fold. And we've actually got Liam Carroll, who he had to get an operation in his knee at the beginning of the season, so he was a regular for us last season, so he'll be coming off the bench this weekend, which is obviously a massive boost. He's been training with the boys, he's been looking really good, so it'll be a huge boost for our backline, having Liam coming out at 12 this weekend. We've still got 4 games left to play. We're Peebles first up, followed by Newton, Stuart, Gordonians and Falkirk. And we're chasing points every week at the moment. I'm not really looking at what other fixtures are going on at the moment because, you look at the results that are happening in the weekend there, Kirkcaldy going to Falkirk. Any team can beat anyone in this league. So as far as I'm concerned, we're still looking to go out and take maximum points away, and the season finishes the end of the year against Falkirk, and we want to go on a bit of a winning streak between now and then.
Berwick had loads of possession and territory in that first 15 to 20 minutes, and which is a good thing, I think, for us in terms of testing our defence, and we really did stand up to that. All they had to show for it was a 3-point penalty going into the second half. However, we broke out a couple of times before half-time, scored definitely against the run of play. That gave us the confidence then to know that, if we got an opportunity, we were clinical and we were able to put those chances away. Just put 50 points on any team is great. The next challenge being Stirling County. We're going into that game. We've lost Murdo Anderson, unfortunately picked up a pretty serious shoulder injury in the Berwick game, so we will definitely be without him for the rest of the season. We're having to test our strength and depth of the squad, which will stand us in good stead going forward, and seeing how many players are up to our standard, but it's not really going to change our outlook into this game. We know that it's going to be a tough game. We are just going out there and looking at winning the game. We know Falkirk are hot on our heels. We know any slip up will allow them an opportunity to overtake us, and that's what we don't want to do. We want to keep the pressure on them by us keeping on winning. In terms of squad-wise, as I said, Murdo Anderson's out, a couple of boys unavailable. I don't think it'll be as wide and expansive because I think Stirling will want to curtail that, but we will look to take our opportunities. We set a good platform on Saturday by using a couple of new things that we introduced, little tweaks to how we set ourselves up. They worked pretty well, so we'll be looking to develop that and hammer that home again, and hopefully deliver that 5-point win.
Graham Patterson, the head coach of Peebles, and they're out to score 5 points at Bridge Hall against Stirling County, and we heard Craig Deakins, the head coach of Stirling County there. So looking at the table then in National 2, Peebles have 62 points, Falkirk have 61 points. They both played 15 games, they both won 12 matches. Impressively, Falkirk 13 try bonuses in their total. Newton Stewart have only one game to play, so they're on 57. Lasswade 54, Gordonians 43, Stuart's Melville 32, Kirkcaldy 30, Stirling County 25, Berwick 20, and Aberdeen Grammar at the bottom with 15 points. So a big north-south divide there, with Gordonians in 5th with 43 and Stuart's Melville 11 points behind them in 6th position. So yes, it really is a two-horse race now. Peebles and Falkirk, and at the bottom Berwick and Aberdeen.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's certainly between, those two teams at the top. You can almost chuck Lasswade in it as well, but they would have to obviously turn over at Falkirk. They've got a game in hand, and they would be hoping that Peebles can slip up as well, and obviously might make things quite interesting at the top of that division. I do feel Peebles now are relying on Lasswade and that Falkirk-Lasswade game to try and give them that comfort. But you said they've got to go to Bridgehock and get 5 points, and I think realistically that's what they're going to be needing to do with a squad that is taking a hit after a really comfortable win against Berwick. And on Berwick's side of things as well, they've got that game in hand, that cushion against Aberdeen Grammar, and as the weekends roll in and the games keep getting played, I think Aberdeen Grammar are potentially looking at another relegation and going down another tier.
International 3 then, and the results from last week: Boroughmuir 44, Hamilton 14, Hillhead Jordanhill 23, Howe 5 22, Orkney 27, Dumfries 21, Preston Lodge 41, Allenglen 17, and West of Scotland 21, Cartha Queen's Park 19. I remember looking at that during the afternoon, and Cartha Queen's Park were 19-0 up there, and they don't get many wins this season. Then West of Scotland came back 21-19, that one finished. But crucially, wins for Preston Lodge and Orkney, and still no joy for Hamilton without a win.
Yeah, they're obviously still finding things really, really difficult. Hamilton in that division, and obviously sit just below Cartha Queen's Park, but all the attention still for me is at the top of the league, and Orkney have got a lot of games in hand over Preston Lodge, but obviously they just managed to squeak over the line against Dumfries this weekend past. So another big weekend in National 3, and obviously there's still a lot to play for at the top and the bottom, quite similar to National 2.
So it is all down to this big match. This Saturday we'll have Sam Matthews there at Pennypit. Preston Lodge against Orkney. Put simply, a PL win on Saturday will stack the odds heavily in their favour. They've also played, as you mentioned, 3 games more than Orkney, so money is in the bank. But it should be a great tussle, and as I say, Sam Matthews will be down there. It's going to be a 3 o'clock kick-off. I don't remember there being lights at Preston Lodge. I know they haven't kicked off at 3 o'clock, so it could be either that Orkney have their travel plans and that will fit in, or it could be because they want their crowd to go straight into the bar afterwards for the Wales-Scotland game.
Yeah, obviously a 3 o'clock kick-off, and I'm not too sure about the logistics behind the timing of the kick-off, but it makes it, it's going to be interesting, because I know we'll be live on air at that time for Jedforest versus Kelso, so I'll be certainly keeping an ear out as to how the proceedings are going at Pennypit, because I think it's a huge game. I think in terms of the interest, I said it weeks ago, the interest in Scottish rugby at the moment, in terms of the national leagues, this is probably for me one of the biggest games this weekend, because the stories behind it. PL are a big powerhouse in Scottish rugby, I think, and obviously fallen over the years as the other clubs have emerged, but Orkney, the commitment that they've had, I've spoke about it time and time again, but I think it would be a great story to see them go up into National 2. So, obviously a lot riding on it this weekend for both of those sides. In the other 2 games in National 3, Boroughmuir will take on West of Scotland. That's a 2 o'clock kick-off. And Hillhead Jordanhill against Cartha Queen's Park. That is a 1:45 kick-off now in that match. The National 3 table then, Preston Lodge at the top, 73, played 16. Orkney have only played 13, they're on 57. Howe 5 54, Allenglen's 49, Hillhead Jordanhill 46, Boroughmuir 41, West of Scotland 29, Dumfries 28, Cartha Queen's Park 15, and Hamilton still without a win after 14 games. They're on 10. Finally then on to National 4, Dunfermline 41, Greenock Wanderers 7, Murrayfield Wanderers 7, North Berwick 35, getting back to winning ways after a couple of defeats, Perthshire 28, Garnock 56, and White Craigs 45, Stuart Tree
32. So a big win for White Craigs, who cement their place in the table in second place. Quick look at the table. In fact, Garnock 64 points, 13 wins out of 13, still 5 games to play. White Craigs in second, having played 14, 56 points for them. Strathmore have only played 12, they're in third with 46, so we won't discount them just yet. North Berwick have 42, Stuartry 41, Dunfermline 38, Greenock Wanderers 34, Perthshire 23, Murrayfield Wanderers 22, and Ross High have played just 11, of course, 11 points at the bottom of the table there. So the fixtures for this weekend: Dunfermline will play Strathmore, Garnock against North Berwick, and Greenock against Stuartry.
Yeah, obviously Garnock on a bit of a roll at the top. 13 wins from 13 is great form. Obviously they've got a little bit of an advantage over the other sides. They've played games less, but it's difficult to see who's going to turn them over so far this season in that form. However, I did say that about Ayr, but I think that Garnock's certainly in the driving seat in that division to get another promotion in that 3.
Remember, 3 go down to be replaced by the winners of the Caledonia West and East regional leagues. And that's it for this week. We'll be back on Saturday at 2:30 later time this weekend for a live programme from Riverside Park for full commentary with Dale and Robin of Jedforest against Kelso, which is a 3 o'clock kick-off. So another massive day at the business end of the season, and to tune in, simply go to rugbyradio.co.uk and click the Listen Live button. We'll have another podcast for you next Thursday, despite no matches happening due to the Six Nations, but we're going to get Robin Purdy in with us to discuss the season so far in all 5 divisions, look ahead to the playoffs, the Cup and the Inter-District Championship. So do join us then for the only podcast devoted exclusively to club rugby in Scotland. Do help spread the word, and we'll see you next week.